Whether or not ancient Egyptians had access to advanced technologies that allowed them to use batteries and electricity thousands of years ago is something firmly debated and considered ludicrous by many archaeologists around the world. However, there seem to be numerous pieces of evidence which suggest it is very possible. Many researchers agree that in the distant past, electricity was widely utilized in the land of the pharaohs, with the Baghdad battery being one of the most discussed examples of such advanced technology. The characteristics of ancient Egyptians are indicated by a set of artifacts and customs that lasted for thousands of years. The Egyptians invented and used many basic machines such as the ramp and the lever to aid construction processes. They used rope trusses to stiffen the beam of ships. Egyptian paper made from papyrus and pottery was mass-produced and exported throughout the Mediterranean basin. The Egyptians also played an important role in developing Mediterranean maritime technology, including ships and lighthouses. Significant advances in ancient Egypt during the dynastic period include astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. Their geometry was a necessary outgrowth of surveying to preserve the layout and ownership of farmland, which was flooded annually by the Nile River. The 3, 4, 5 right triangle and other rules of thumb served to represent rectilinear structures and the post and lintel architecture of Egypt. Egypt also was a center of alchemy research for much of the Western world. Scenes depict scientists able to work in fields of alchemy, biology, chemistry, dentistry, anesthesiology, air flight, and more. The ancient Egyptians got the technology from extraterrestrial. While some speculate about the Saqqara bird as a potential model of an ancient aircraft. This small wooden bird found in an Egyptian tomb has sparked speculation about ancient Egyptian aviation, with some suggesting it's a model of a glider or early airplane. Did ancient Egyptians have airplanes? The pyramids and other advanced artifacts from ancient Egypt continue to awe archaeologists and archaeology enthusiasts, but is it possible the ancient Egyptians had aviation? A wooden carving dating from the 3rd century BC was found in a tomb in Saqqara, also spelled Saqqara, Egypt, in 1898. It was classified as a bird figure and placed with other bird carvings at the Cairo Museum until Dr. Khalil Masiha, a medical doctor and Egyptologist, saw it in 1969 and realized it looked like the model airplanes he made as a child. They also found carvings of flying vehicles that resemble modern-day aircraft, such as the helicopter, submarine or USO, gliders, weather-altering devices, and airplanes. Also, one of the artifacts called gold flyers found in Colombia, which looks like a modern-day aircraft. These crafts were designed by the Anunnaki Enki millions of years ago. Posed as if leaping through the air, this carved ivory dog opens its mouth as a lever is pushed up and down, revealing 2 lower teeth and a red tongue. The dog, which was discovered in an ancient Egyptian tomb, is a reminder that these domesticated canines have been beloved pets for at least 3,400 years. Yes, ancient Egyptians definitely kept dogs, often as pets and companions, and they held a significant place in Egyptian culture. They were also used for hunting and guarding. Evidence of dogs in ancient Egypt is found in paintings, tomb scenes, and even in the mummified remains of pets. Ancient Egyptian artwork, including paintings on pottery and relief carvings, depicts dogs, particularly greyhounds, associated with hunting and guarding. Even the famous pharaoh hound, an ancient sighthound breed, is believed to have originated in Egypt. Dogs were also connected to the afterlife, with the god Anubis, often depicted with a jackal head, being associated with the protection and guidance of the dead. Besides being companions, dogs were used for hunting, especially large game like gazelles, as guard dogs, and even for military purposes. Some dogs were mummified and buried alongside their owners. This suggests a deep emotional bond and respect for these animals. Ancient Egyptians even gave their dogs names, often reflecting their personality or role, and many were found wearing collars. Even pharaohs and other members of the royal family kept dogs as pets. For example, the dog Abutiu, a royal guard dog, received an elaborate burial. Electricity or something else? Some have suggested that the Egyptians had some form of understanding of electric phenomena from observing lightning and interacting with electric fish, such as the Melapterurus electricus, or other animals such as electric eels. The electric comes from high poles covered with copper plates. The copper-covered tops of poles, which were lower than the associated pylons, relate to electricity or lightning, pointing out that they had use of manipulating electricity and technical power installations. These poles resemble modern-day electrical transformers. In electrical engineering, a transformer is a passive component that transfers electrical energy from one electrical circuit to another circuit or multiple circuits. The single representation of the image, called the Dendera light by some alternative suggestions, exists on the left wall of the right wing in one of the crypts of the Hathor temple. Those exploring fringe theories of ancient technology have suggested that there were electric lights used in ancient Egypt. Engineers have constructed a working model based on their interpretation of a relief found in the Hathor temple at the Dendera temple complex. The Dendera light is a technology of electrical lighting supposedly in existence in ancient Egypt, proposed by some fringe authors. Proponents argue that the technology is depicted in the Hathor temple at the Dendera temple complex located in Egypt on 3 stone reliefs, one single and a double representation, which resembles some modern electrical lighting systems. Egyptologists, to cover up that the Nubians had lights for thousands of years, reject the facts and explain the reliefs as a typical set of symbolic images from Egyptian mythology, while they kept the real truth a secret. Authors such as Peter Krasa and Reinhard Habeck have produced a basic theory of the device's operation. The standard explanation, however, for the Dendera light, which comprises 3 stone reliefs, one single and a double representation, is that the depicted image represents a lotus leaf and flower from which a sacred snake is spawned in accordance with Egyptian mythological beliefs. This sacred snake sometimes is identified as the Milky Way, the snake in the night sky, the leaf, lotus, or bulb, that became identified with Hathor because of her similar association in creation. The cathode ray tube, or Crookes tube-like object depicted in scenes from the Temple of Hathor at Dendera may depict a relativistic source of these heavy electrons, which could drastically expedite the magical processes which involve these particular tubes. The walls are decorated with human figures next to bulb-like objects reminiscent of oversized light bulbs. Inside these bulbs there are snakes and wavy lines. The snake's pointed tails issue from a lotus flower which, without much imagination, can be interpreted as the socket of the bulb. Something similar to a wire leads to a small box on which the air god is kneeling. Man, the Egyptians were ahead of the game, because air connects with electricity. Air is generally considered an insulator, meaning it doesn't allow electricity to flow easily, although electricity can be transmitted through the air. Now, adjacent to the air god stands a 2-armed Djed pillar as a symbol of power which is connected to the snake. Also remarkable is the baboon-like demon holding 2 knives in his hands, which are interpreted as a protective and defensive power. In his book The Eyes of the Sphinx, Eric von Daniken writes that the relief is found in a secret crypt that can be accessed only through a small opening. The room has a low ceiling, the air is stale and laced with the smell of dried urine from the guards who occasionally use it as a urinal. The room is not so secret, however, as many tourists visit and photograph the room every year. Von Daniken sees the snake as a filament, the Djed pillar as an insulator, and claims the monkey with the sharpened knives symbolizes the danger that awaits those who do not understand the device, meaning electricity is dangerous and feels like a crazy monkey poking you with knives if you're shocked. This device is, the reader is assured, an ancient electric light bulb. Light. The Egyptian Ankh is an ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic symbol meaning life and was often carried as an amulet. It appears in proximity to almost every deity in the Egyptian pantheon. Some believe it was used to conduct electricity in ancient Egypt. There are striking similarities between the Ankh and Nikola Tesla's electric oscillator, which generates signals used in electronic devices. A viral image has been making the rounds comparing Nikola Tesla's electric oscillator to the Egyptian Ankh, claiming ancient civilizations had advanced electrical knowledge. But is there any real evidence for this? Let's take a closer look. Nikola Tesla is an extraterrestrial from Venus. Tesla's electromechanical oscillator is a steam-powered electric generator patented by Nikola Tesla in 1893. It produced vibrations that could be felt hundreds of feet away, but no earthquake shaking on the bridge they attached to. They judged that the claim that the device produced an earthquake to be false. Tesla's oscillator is a reciprocating electricity generator. Steam would be forced into the oscillator and exit through a series of ports, pushing a piston up and down that was attached to an armature, causing it to vibrate up and down at high speed, producing electricity. The casing's upper chamber had to withstand pressures of 400 psi, 2.8 megapascals, and temperatures exceeding 200 degrees Celsius. Some versions used air trapped behind the piston as an air spring, increasing efficiency. Another variation used electromagnets to control the frequency of the piston's oscillation. The yunque is an electromagnetic device. You see it in the hands of the gods or Neteru Najaru. You also see them carrying the scepter, which is a device we use to move stones for pyramids, which they use to harness electromagnetic energy. The ancient Egyptian also used a jib, which is the spine of God, which is used to transfer consciousness. It too is an electromagnetic device. An apotropaic symbol is a symbol or mark used to avert evil or ward off negative forces. They are often found in historical buildings, particularly in Europe, and were believed to protect homes and individuals from witchcraft, demons, or other malevolent entities. The Egyptian symbol is supposed to represent life. This is why many ancient Egyptian deities were represented with the symbol of the ankh in their hands, representing life. The loop of the ankh is held by the gods. It is associated with Isis and Osiris in the dynastic period. The loop of the ankh also represents the feminine discipline, while the elongated section represents the masculine discipline. The Ankh key is ancient technology created by Tahuti, son of Enki. It is used to access the higher dimensions, a key to open doors to higher realms. Metallurgy was carried on with an elaborate technique and a business organization not unworthy of the modern world, while the systematic exploitation of mines was an important industry employing many thousands of workers. Even as early as 3400 BC, at the beginning of the historical period, the Egyptians had an intimate knowledge of copper ores and of processes of extracting the metal. During the 4th and subsequent dynasties, that is from about 2900 BC onwards, metals seem to have been entirely monopolies of the court, the management of the mines and quarries being entrusted to the highest officials, and sometimes even to the sons of the pharaoh. Whether these exalted personages were themselves professional metallurgists, we do not know, but we may at least surmise that the details of metallurgical practice, being of extreme importance to the crown, were carefully guarded from the vulgar. And when we remember the close association between the Egyptian royal family and the priestly class, we appreciate the probable truth of the tradition that chemistry first came to light in the laboratories of Egyptian priests. In addition to copper, which was mined in the eastern desert between the Nile and the Red Sea, iron was known in Egypt from a very early period and came into general use about 800 BC. According to Lucas, iron appears to have been an Asiatic discovery. It was certainly known in Asia Minor about I-300 BC. One of the kings of the Hittites sent Ramesses II, the celebrated pharaoh of the 19th dynasty, an iron sword and a promise of a shipment of the same metal. The Egyptians called iron the metal of heaven, or Ba and Pet, which indicates that the first specimen employed were of meteoric origin, the Babylonian name having the same meaning. It was no doubt on account of its rarity that iron was prized so highly by the early Egyptians, while its celestial source would have its fascination. Strange to say, it was not used for decorative, religious, or symbolical purposes, which, coupled with the fact that it rusts so readily, may explain why comparatively few iron objects of early dynastic age have been discovered. One which has fortunately survived presents several points of interest. It is an iron tool from the masonry of the Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza, and thus presumably dates from the time when the pyramid was being built, that is about 2900 BC. This tool was subjected to chemical analysis and was found to contain combined carbon, which suggests that it may have been composed of steel. By 666 BC, the process of case hardening was in use for the edges of iron tools, but the story that the Egyptians had some secret means of hardening copper and bronze is now known by the elites. They used it in their spaceships. Desch has shown that a hammered bronze containing 10.34% of tin is considerably harder than copper and keeps a cutting edge much better. Of the other non-precious metals, tin was used in the manufacture of bronze, and cobalt has been detected as a coloring agent in certain specimens of glass and glaze. Neither metal occurs naturally in Egypt, and it seems probable that supplies of ore were imported from Persia. Lead, though it never found extensive application, was among the earliest metals known, specimen having been found in graves of pre-dynastic times. Galena, PBS, was mined in Egypt at Gebel Rasas, Mountain of Lead, a few miles from the Red Sea coast, and the supply must have been fairly good. For when the district was reworked from 1912 to 1915, it produced more than 18,000 tons of ore. The vast quantities of gold amassed by the pharaohs were the envy of contemporary and later sovereigns. Though much was imported, received by way of tribute, or captured in warfare, the Egyptian mines themselves were reasonably productive. Egyptian goldsmiths washing, melting, and weighing gold. Beni Hassan, 1900 BC. Over 100 ancient gold workings have been discovered in Egypt and the Sudan, though within the limits of Egypt proper there appear to have been gold mines only in the desert valleys to the east of the Nile near Ekoptos, Ombos, and Apollinopolis Magna. Of one of these mines, possibly near Apollinopolis, a plan has been found in a papyrus of the 14th century BC, and the remains of no fewer than 1,300 houses for gold miners are still to be seen in the Wadi Fawakir, halfway between Koptos and the Red Sea. In one of the treasure chambers of the Temple of Ramesses III at Medinet Habu are represented 8 large bags, 7 of which contained gold and bear the following descriptive labels. The Egyptian word for gold is nub, which survives in the name Nubia, a country that provided a great deal of the precious metal in ancient days. French scientist Champollion regarded it as a kind of crucible, while Rossellini and Lepsius preferred to see in it a bag or cloth with hanging ends in which the grains of gold were washed, the radiating lines representing the streams of water that ran through. Gold washing in ancient Egypt. Crivelli has more recently advanced the theory that the gold symbol is the conventional sign for a portable furnace used for the fusion of gold, and that the rays represent the flames, which, as can be observed in the use of this type of furnace, are unable to ascend because the wind inclines them horizontally. In the later dynasties, the Egyptians themselves forgot the original significance of the sign and drew it as a necklace with pendant beads. Elliot Smith, however, says that this was the primitive form and became the determinative of Hathor, the Egyptian Aphrodite, who was the guardian of the eastern valleys where gold was found. Egyptian goldsmith workshop in the Pyramid Age. The gold mines in Nubia and other parts of the Egyptian Empire seem to have been very efficiently designed and controlled, though with a callous disregard for the human element employed. Alluvial auriferous sand was also treated, a distinction being made between the gold obtained in this way and that extracted from the mines. The latter was called Nuben Set, that is gold of the mountain, while alluvial gold was named Nuben Mu, that is gold of the river. Auriferous sand was placed in a bag made of a fleece with the woolly side inwards. Water was then added and the bag vigorously shaken by 2 men. When the water was poured off, the earthy particles were carried away, leaving the heavier particles of gold adhering to the fleece. There is a picture of this operation on one of the buildings at Thebes. Mercury, Greek hydragyros, liquid silver, Latin argentum vivum, live or quicksilver, is stated to have been found in Egyptian tombs of from 1500 to 1600 BC. Glass making. Egyptian knowledge of glass making was advanced. The earliest known glass beads from Egypt were made during the New Kingdom around 1500 BC and were produced in a variety of colors. They were made by winding molten glass around a metal bar and were highly prized as a trading commodity, especially blue beads, which were believed to have magical powers. The Egyptians made small jars and bottles using the core form method. Glass threads were wound around a bag of sand tied to a rod. The glass was continually reheated to fuse the threads together. The glass-covered sandbag was kept in motion until the required shape and thickness was achieved. The rod was allowed to cool, then finally the bag was punctured and the rod removed. The Egyptians also created the first colored glass rods, which they used to create colorful beads and decorations. They also worked with cast glass, which was produced by pouring molten glass into a mold, much like iron and the more modern crucible steel. The remains of glass furnaces discovered by Flinders Petrie at Tel El Amarna, 1400 BC, illustrates the manufacture of rods, beads, and jars or other figures formed apparently by covering clay cores with glass and later removing the cores. Egyptian glass articles were of colored glass, often beautifully patterned. Analyses of ancient Egyptian glass articles show that generally glass was a soda-lime glass with rather soda content as compared with modern soda-lime glass. Egyptian making pottery with furnace Beni Hassan, 1900 BC. The given analyses do not differ from those of some soda-lime glasses of modern times. Lead was used in glasses from very ancient times. French scientists analyzed a vase of the 4th dynasty in Egypt that contained about 1/4 lead. Artificial pearls made of glass were manufactured in such numbers that they formed an important article of export trade, and the old legends of enormous emeralds and other precious stones are most reasonably explained on the assumption that the preparation of paste jewelry was widely undertaken. The earliest glassworks remains of which have been found date from the 18th dynasty, and the oldest dated glass object is a large ball bead bearing the cartouche of Amenhotep I, now in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford. The invention of glass blowing, as opposed to the older method of glass molding, is comparatively recent, dating back only to about the beginning of the Christian era. Sir Flinders Petrie has shown that the reliefs at Beni Hassan, which were formerly supposed to represent glass blowers, are more probably to be interpreted as metal workers blowing a fire. Paper and writing. The word paper comes from the Greek term for the ancient Egyptian writing material called papyrus, which was formed from beaten strips of papyrus plants. Papyrus was produced as early as 3000 BC in Egypt and sold to ancient Greece and Rome. The establishment of the Library of Alexandria limited the supply of papyrus for others. As a result, according to the Roman historian Pliny, Natural History Records Sher.21, parchment was invented under the patronage of Eumenes II of Pergamon to build his rival library at Pergamon. Egyptian hieroglyphs, a phonetic writing system, served as the basis for the Phoenician alphabet, from which later alphabets were derived. With this ability, writing and record-keeping, the Egyptians developed one of the, if not the, first decimal system. The city of Alexandria retained preeminence for its records and scrolls with its library. That ancient library was damaged by fire when it fell under Roman rule and was destroyed completely by 642 CE. With it, a huge amount of antique literature, history, and knowledge was lost. Structures and construction buildings. Many temples from ancient Egypt are still standing today. Some are in ruin from wear and tear, while others have been lost entirely. The Egyptian structures are among the largest constructions ever conceived and built by humans. They constitute one of the most potent and enduring symbols of ancient Egyptian civilization. Temples and tombs built by a pharaoh famous for her projects, Hatshepsut, were massive and included many colossal statues of her. Pharaoh Tutankhamun's rock-cut tomb in the Valley of the Kings was full of jewelry and antiques. In some late myths, Ptah was identified as the primordial mound and had called creation into being. He was considered the deity of craftsmen, and in particular of stone-based crafts. Imhotep, who was included in the Egyptian pantheon, was the first documented engineer. In Hellenistic Egypt, lighthouse technology was developed, the most famous example being the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Alexandria was a port for the ships that traded the goods manufactured in Egypt or imported into Egypt. A giant cantilevered hoist lifted cargo to and from ships. The lighthouse itself was designed by Sostratus of Cnidus the Moor and built in the 3rd century BC, between 285 and 247 BC, on the island of Pharos in Alexandria, Egypt, which has since become a peninsula. This lighthouse was renowned in its time, and knowledge of it was never lost. A 2006 drawing of it, created from the study of many references, is shown at the right. The Nile Valley has been the site of one of the most influential civilizations in the world, with its architectural monuments, which include the pyramids of Giza and the Great Sphinx, among the largest and most famous buildings in the world. The most famous pyramids are the Egyptian pyramids, huge structures built of brick or stone, some of which are among the largest constructions by humans. Pyramids functioned as tombs for pharaohs. In ancient Egypt, a pyramid was referred to as Mer, literally place of ascendance. The Great Pyramid of Giza is the largest in Egypt and one of the largest in the world. The base is over 13 acres, 53,000 m in area. It is one of the 7 wonders of the world and the only one of the 7 to survive into modern times. The ancient Egyptians capped the peaks of their pyramids with gold and covered their faces with polished white limestone, although many of the stones used for the finishing purpose have fallen or been removed for use on other structures over the millennia. The Red Pyramid of Egypt, c.26th century BC, named for the light crimson hue of its exposed granite surfaces, is the third largest of Egyptian pyramids. Menkaura's pyramid, likely dating to the same era, was constructed of limestone and granite blocks. The Great Pyramid of Giza, c. 2580 BC, contains a huge granite sarcophagus fashioned of red Aswan granite. The mostly ruined Black Pyramid, dating from the reign of Amenemhat III, once had a polished granite pyramidion or capstone, now on display in the main hall of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Other uses in ancient Egypt include columns, door lintels, sills, jambs, and wall and floor veneer. The ancient Egyptians had some of the first monumental stone building. How the Egyptians worked the solid granite is still a matter of debate. Dr. Patrick Hunt has postulated that the Egyptians used emery, shown to have higher hardness on the Mohs scale. Regarding construction, of the various methods possibly used by builders, the lever moved and uplifted obelisks weighing more than 100 tons. Obelisks were a prominent part of the architecture of the ancient Egyptians, who placed them in pairs at the entrances of various monuments and important buildings, such as temples. In 1902, Encyclopedia Britannica wrote, "The earliest temple obelisk still in position is that of Senwosri I of the 12th dynasty at Heliopolis, 68 feet high." The word obelisk is of Greek rather than Egyptian origin because Herodotus, the great traveler, was the first writer to describe the objects. 29 ancient Egyptian obelisks are known to have survived, plus the unfinished obelisk being built by Hatshepsut to celebrate her 16th year as pharaoh. It broke while being carved out of the quarry and was abandoned when another one was begun to replace it. The broken one was found at Aswan and provides the only insight into the methods of how they were hewn. The obelisk symbolized the sky deity Ra, and during the brief religious reformation of Akhenaten was said to be a petrified ray of the Aten, the sun disk. It is hypothesized by New York University Egyptologist Patricia Blackwell-Gary and astronomy senior editor Richard Talcott that the shapes of the ancient Egyptian pyramid and obelisk were derived from natural phenomena associated with the sun god Ra being the Egyptians' greatest deity. It was also thought that the deity existed within the structure. The Egyptians also used pillars extensively. It is unknown whether the ancient Egyptians had kites, but a team led by Maureen Clemens and Maury Garib raised a 900-pound, 15-foot, 4.6 m obelisk into vertical position with a kite, a system of pulleys, and a support frame. Maureen Clemens developed the idea that the ancient Egyptians used kites for work. Ramps have been reported as being widely used in ancient Egypt. A ramp is inclined plane, or a plane surface set at an angle, other than a right angle, against a horizontal surface. The inclined plane permits one to overcome a large resistance by applying a relatively small force through a longer distance than the load is to be raised. In civil engineering, the slope, ratio of rise-run, is often referred to as a grade or gradient. An inclined plane is one of the commonly recognized simple machines. Maureen Clemens subsequently led a team of researchers demonstrating a kite made of natural material and reinforced with shellac, which, according to their research, pulled with 97% the efficiency of nylon in a 9 miles per hour wind, would easily pull an average 2-ton pyramid stone up the first 2 courses of a pyramid in collaboration with Cal Poly Pomona on a 53-stone pyramid built in Rosamond, California. Ancient Egyptians had experience with building a variety of ships. Some of them survive to this day as Khufu's solar ship. The ships were found in many areas of Egypt, as the Abydos boats and remnants of other ships were found near the pyramids. Sneferu's ancient cedar wood ship, Praise of the Two Lands, is the first reference recorded to a ship being referred to by name. Although quarter rudders were the norm in Nile navigation, the Egyptians were the first to use also stern-mounted rudders. The ancient Egyptians had knowledge to some extent of sail construction. This is governed by the science of aerodynamics. The earliest Egyptian sails were simply placed to catch the wind and push a vessel. Later Egyptian sails dating to 2400 BCE were built with the recognition that ships could sail against the wind using the side wind. Queen Hatshepsut oversaw the preparations and funding of an expedition of 5 ships, each measuring 70 feet long and with several sails. Various others exist also. Irrigation as the artificial application of water to the soil was used to some extent in ancient Egypt, a hydraulic civilization which entailed hydraulic engineering. In crop production, it is mainly used to replace missing rainfall in periods of drought, as opposed to reliance on direct rainfall, referred to as dryland farming or as rain-fed farming. There is evidence of the ancient Egyptian pharaoh Amenemhet III in the 12th dynasty, about 1800 BCE, using the natural lake of the Fayum as a reservoir to store surpluses of water for use during the dry seasons, as the lake swelled annually as caused by the annual flooding of the Nile. To lift the water from the canal, they used a shaduf. A shaduf is a large pole balanced on a cross beam, a rope and bucket on one end, and a heavy counterweight at the other. By pulling the rope, it lowered the bucket into the canal. The farmer then raised the bucket of water by pulling down on the weight. He then swung the pole around and emptied the bucket onto the field. Animals were very important to Egyptian farmers. Animals helped them with jobs like trampling in the seeds, pulling the plow, eating unwanted grain or wheat, and providing the Egyptians with food and drink. They kept animals such as cattle, goats, pigs, ducks, cows, and geese. The Egyptians developed a variety of furniture. There, in the lands of ancient Egypt, is the first evidence for stools, beds, and tables, such as from the tombs similar to Tutankhamun's. Recovered ancient Egyptian furniture includes a 3rd millennium BC. Bed discovered in the Tarkan tomb AC. 2550 BC. Gilded set from the tomb of Queen Hetepheres and a c. 1550 BC. Stool from Thebes. Ancient Egyptian depiction of women engaged in mechanical rope making, the first graphic evidence of the craft, shown in the 2 lower rows of the illustration.